The phone line crackles. Police department. Police department. A man's trembling voice answers, "Yes." This is Jimmy Allen. It's 8:40 p.m. in the quiet suburbs of Michigan. 37-year-old Jimmy Allen has just discovered something no husband ever wants to find. His wife, lifeless in their basement. 18 minutes earlier, he dialed 911. His voice was frantic, gasping between words, begging for help. "She's in the basement. I pulled her up, tried CPR." The dispatcher's calm tone contrasts the panic in Jimmy's voice. "Keep giving her CPR," she instructs while police units rush through the dark streets toward the Allen residence. Officer Ben Horn is the first to arrive. From outside, the house looks perfectly normal, suburban, peaceful, unremarkable. But as Horn approaches, something feels off. The home is eerily silent. Then, a sudden cry pierces the air. "Help, police department, help!" Horn rushes into the basement. There, on the cold concrete floor, he finds Jimmy sobbing over his wife's unresponsive body, performing CPR through choked breaths. "How long's she been down?" Horn asks. Jimmy shakes his head, voice cracking. "It can't be more than 20 minutes. Amy Allen, 36 years old, shows no obvious signs of injury, just a faint mark on her neck, barely visible under the basement light. By 8:57 p.m., the room is crowded with officers and EMTs. They take over CPR while Jimmy collapses onto the floor, ripping off his shirt and screaming through tears. Moments later, he seems calm again. Too calm. He watches the medics work, eyes fixed, breathing steady. Then, as if something snaps, he hurls a bowl of potato chips across the kitchen in sudden rage. The officers exchange glances. His behavior is erratic, almost rehearsed, but none of them have the full picture yet. Jimmy tells them that the night started out normal. Around 6:30 p.m., he and his wife dropped their daughter, Ashley, off at a high school football game. Afterward, they went downtown for a few drinks. At the bar, they argued. Jimmy says it was about nothing serious, but Amy got upset and decided to walk home. He drove. When Amy returned, the fight continued. So Jimmy says he left her alone, went upstairs and turned on Ace Ventura, trying to cool off. When it was time to pick up their daughter, he went back downstairs to check on Amy. That's when, according to him, he found her, unresponsive, with an extension cord nearby. "Does Amy have any history of this kind of thing?" an officer asks. Jimmy shakes his head. "Nothing, never. She'd never do something like this. To him, it's unthinkable. To the officers, it's suspicious." Then, a sudden spark of hope. An EMT calls out, "She's fighting." Amy has a faint pulse. She's alive, but instead of relief, Jimmy's face hardens. His reaction isn't joy, it's frustration. The officers catch it immediately. Something about his expression doesn't match the moment. Moments later, he steps away, changes shirts, and calls his daughter. "We had an emergency," he says, voice steady. "Don't go anywhere. I'll talk to you soon." He sounds calm, measured, almost practiced. Then he calls his parents, and the tears return. "I don't know what to do, Mom. This is terrible. I have to talk to the cops." But as Officer Horn watches, he notices something strange. Jimmy's face is completely dry. No tears. The police escort him outside while EMTs load Amy into the ambulance. The sirens wail as she's rushed to a nearby hospital, just 2 minutes away. Inside the now empty basement, the officers begin to look around. That's when they notice something odd. The ceiling is unusually low, barely 7 feet high. Amy was 5'6". If she had hung herself, her feet should have touched the ground. Still, the officers don't want to jump to conclusions. They seal off the scene for the night. The next morning, they return for follow-up questions. Jimmy seems calm, even cooperative. He paints a picture of a happy family morning. Breakfast, laughter, music. He says Amy was smiling, their daughter was in good spirits. "I left for work at 7:30, he tells them. "Came home early, took a nap, and we all had dinner before heading to the football game." Everything, he insists, was normal. At first glance, it sounds believable. But the more Jimmy talks, the less it adds up. Amy didn't have financial stress. She didn't have a mental health history. They lived comfortably. They had hobbies, pets, a pool, a daughter who adored her mother. Still, something had shattered that calm suburban life, and the truth, whatever it was buried beneath Jimmy's carefully chosen words. When the officers ask to search the home more thoroughly, Jimmy agrees without hesitation. They comb through the house, collecting Amy's laptop, her phone, anything that might explain what happened. Even their cat, Louie, wanders curiously through the rooms as evidence bags fill up. Then the officers speak with Ashley, the couple's teenage daughter. Her voice trembles. "They weren't fighting when I left," she says. "Everything was normal." She describes her mother as quiet but happy, introverted but loving. Never depressed. Never violent. It's not much, but to the investigators it's another piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit Jimmy's story. Hours later, Amy's relatives arrive at the station. They're devastated and angry. They tell police that Jimmy waited nearly 14 hours before contacting them. And what they reveal next changes everything. They say Jimmy wasn't the devoted husband he pretended to be. According to Amy's family, he was controlling, obsessive even. He monitored what she ate, who she talked to, and what she posted online. He dictated every detail of their lives. When Amy's son Caleb, from a previous relationship, turned 17, he moved out to live with his grandparents. Jimmy's response? He banned Amy from contacting her own family. Her world grew smaller and smaller until Jimmy was the only person left in it. To outsiders, Jimmy Allen looked like the picture of success. A steady job, a clean house, a smiling family photo. But to those who knew Amy best, it was all a performance, and soon, that performance would crumble. Because while the police were still processing what looked like a tragic suicide, evidence was beginning to suggest something far darker, a story of control, jealousy, and a man who couldn't stand to lose the woman he claimed to love. The next morning, the hospital called. Amy Allen had been pronounced dead. Jimmy's reaction was muted. No collapse, no sobbing breakdown, no disbelief, just a slow nod and a quiet, "Okay." To the detectives, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like relief. Within hours, they requested a full autopsy. While Jimmy made plans for a memorial, the medical examiner began piecing together the final moments of Amy's life. The results raised immediate red flags. There were marks on Amy's neck, yes, but they didn't match the kind left by a hanging. The pattern was inconsistent, too broad, too uneven, and there was something else. No damage to the vertebrae, no evidence that her neck had borne the kind of weight that hanging typically causes. This wasn't suicide. It was staged. Back at the police station, detectives revisited Jimmy's 911 call. The way he spoke, the timing, the tone, it didn't sound like a husband in shock. It sounded like a man reciting a script. Every sentence was deliberate, almost rehearsed. They called in digital forensic experts to analyze Amy's phone and laptop. That's when they found the first real break in the case, a series of messages, half deleted but recoverable. The texts painted a portrait of a woman living in quiet fear. In one, she told a close friend, "I can't make him happy anymore. Everything I do just makes him angry." In another, "He doesn't let me talk to anyone. I feel like I'm trapped." The more they read, the clearer it became Amy hadn't been suicidal. She'd been isolated, controlled, and terrified. Detectives traced her online searches. In the days leading up to her death, Amy had looked up phrases like, "how to leave a controlling marriage," and "how to hide money from your spouse." Meanwhile, Jimmy's search history told a different story. He'd been looking up how to perform CPR, how long it takes to die from strangulation, and even how to make something look like suicide. Each discovery hit the investigators like a hammer. The puzzle pieces were aligning, and they all pointed to Jimmy. When detectives brought him in for a second interview, they watched him closely. The first time he'd been emotional, scattered. This time he was composed and almost rehearsed again. "I didn't hurt her," he repeated. "I loved her, she wasn't happy anymore." But when they mentioned the autopsy report, his confidence faltered. "Jimmy," one detective said softly, "the marks on Amy's neck, they're not from hanging." He froze, his jaw tightened, eyes darting. Then he tried to recover. Maybe I pulled her too hard when I was doing CPR." The room went still. It was a desperate explanation, and everyone in that room knew it. The detectives didn't confront him directly yet. They wanted more. They wanted something that would hold up in court. So they widened their investigation. Neighbors, co-workers, friends, and every person they spoke to said the same thing. Jimmy Allen had a temper. One neighbor recalled hearing shouting late at night, Amy's voice pleading, Jimmy's voice booming. Another said they'd seen him throw things in the yard during arguments. Then came the detail that shattered any lingering doubt. A co-worker of Amy's revealed that, weeks before her death, Amy had confided in her. "If anything ever happens to me, it won't be an accident." Those words haunted the detectives. They could hear them every time they replayed Jimmy's 911 call. Still, the final piece came from a place they didn't expect: the family cat, Louie. In the basement, investigators noticed faint scratch marks on the floor near Amy's body. Forensics later confirmed they were from Louie's claws. The cat had been trapped down there during the attack, clawing at the ground, trying to get to Amy. It was small, but it told a devastating truth. Amy had struggled. There had been movement, a fight, and just like that, the suicide narrative collapsed completely. By the time detectives called Jimmy back for questioning a third time, they had enough evidence to formally name him a suspect. He showed up wearing a crisp button-down shirt, calm as ever. He asked if he could record the conversation for his own protection. Then, for hours he talked, spinning the same story, word for word as if memorized. But when investigators presented the evidence and the search history, the autopsy, the messages, his calm cracked. He shifted in his chair, leaned back and muttered, "You're twisting things." They pressed harder. "Jimmy, did you strangle Amy?" Silence. He lowered his head, rubbing his temples, and whispered, "No, I just wanted her to stop screaming." The confession wasn't direct, but it was enough. Police arrested Jimmy Allen that evening, charging him with the murder of his wife. As the news spread, the community that once saw the Allens as the perfect suburban family struggled to process the truth. The man who'd been the face of stability was now accused of something unthinkable, a calculated, cold-blooded act of control. But the story wasn't over, because in court, Jimmy Allen would try to rewrite the narrative again, to convince a jury that the evidence was wrong, the police were mistaken, and that he was still the grieving husband he claimed to be. And when the trial began, no one was ready for what he'd say next. Months passed, and the quiet Michigan town that once saw the Allens as the picture of perfection now whispered their names in disbelief. Jimmy Allen, the family man, the neighbor who mowed his lawn every Sunday, was now sitting in a jail cell, waiting for his day in court. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, family members, neighbors, everyone wanted to see the man who'd once smiled through block parties and PTA meetings, now faced the evidence that told a far darker story. Jimmy walked in wearing a suit too large for his frame, hair neatly combed, eyes vacant. He still called Amy's death a tragedy, but one he insisted that he didn't cause. The prosecution's case was devastating. They started with the 911 call, playing it for the jury in full. Every tremor, every pause, every word that had once sounded like panic now echoed with calculation. Then came the autopsy. The medical examiner described in chilling detail how Amy's neck showed bruising inconsistent with hanging, how the blood vessels in her eyes, the marks on her jawline, and the lack of damage to her spine all pointed to one thing: she had been strangled. When the photos appeared on the courtroom screen, Jimmy looked away. Not out of shame, but out of irritation, like a man tired of hearing the same story. The prosecution then moved to motive, control. They presented the text messages, Amy's internet searches, and the testimony of her friends and family. Each message painted a clearer picture of a woman desperate to escape. Her best friend testified that Amy had called her just 2 nights before she died, whispering into the phone, "I think he's going to hurt me." The jury listened in silence. Then, the prosecution brought up Jimmy's own search history, his quiet online inquiries, about strangulation and how to make something look like suicide. The evidence spoke, louder than anything else in the room. When it was the defense's turn, they tried to spin the narrative. They claimed Amy had been under emotional stress, that her death was a tragic impulsive act, and that Jimmy had simply tried to save her too late. But by then, no one was buying it. The image of the devoted husband had vanished. In its place stood a man who couldn't bear to lose control. As the trial neared its end, the prosecution played one final recording. Jimmy's second police interview. The moment where he muttered, "I just wanted her to stop screaming," the courtroom fell silent. Amy's family clutched each other's hands. The jurors stared at the floor. Even the judge paused before continuing. That one line stripped away the last of Jimmy's defense. It was the quiet admission of a man who'd finally said more than he meant to. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Jimmy Allen showed no reaction, no tears, no outrage, just a blank stare toward the wall, as if the world around him had gone quiet. When the judge handed down the sentence, a minimum of 30 years in prison, Amy's mother wept. She said it wasn't justice, not really, but at least it was truth. In the years since the trial, Amy's story has become a warning, a reminder that control and love can never coexist, and that behind even the calmest suburban smiles, the darkest secrets can hide in plain sight. Her daughter Ashley, now an adult, speaks publicly about emotional abuse and coercive control, the invisible chains her mother tried to break before it was too late. As for Jimmy Allen, he remains behind bars appealing his conviction, still claiming he's innocent. But to everyone who remembers that night, the 911 call, the calm voice, the staged scene in the basement, the truth will always be clear. Amy didn't take her own life. Someone she trusted took it from her, and that's what makes this case and her final moments impossible to forget.